BBC Sounds. Music, radio, podcasts.
Hello, it's Anna Hill here with the Farming Today podcast. This time, could new technology in farming mean more jobs, not fewer?
We might reduce those numbers of people that are doing the really repetitive jobs where robots can come into play, but actually the engineers, the data analysts, those kind of people that can really push this new innovation forward are going to increase in numbers.
We'll have more on that a little later. First, though, this week we're looking at seaweed, what it's used for and how it's farmed in the waters around the UK. At the Scottish Association for Marine Science in Oban, scientists are embarking on a new 5-year international research project looking at the economics of extracting various products from seaweed, as well as assessing the climate resilience of different species and even training up new seaweed farmers. Nina Pullman first went to taste some seaweed herself with Rhianna Rees from the Scottish Seaweed Association.
So this one is from Southwest Mull and Iona, which is a community farm on Mull, and they farm a few different species. So this that I've got here is Alaria, which is winged kelp.
So this would be just eaten as a kind of, how would you eat this?
It can be eaten in a number of ways. I would just eat it as it is. It's like a little kale crisp. It can also be fermented. There's a few different ways of preparing it.
Wow. Yeah, it's got a really strong flavour, hasn't it?
Yeah.
Salty. It is a bit like a crisp. I mean, not that many people eat seaweed, do they, at this point? So is that the long-term aim for the industry?
It's a collection, definitely. Yeah, feed, animal feed is another big one that we're exploring because we have 650 species around the UK and not all of them are going to taste good and not all of them are going to be useful, you know.
There's lots of research being done in this area, how to grow it, where to grow it, what species to grow, what products to make out of it. And so I'm in Oban, I'm going to the Scottish Association for Marine Science, where they've got an experimental farm, they've got a nursery, they've got a lot of seaweed scientists there working on all of those questions.
I'm Professor Michelle Stanley. I work with both seaweeds and microalgae, and it's everything from how you grow them, what's in them and what you can potentially do with them. From our point of view, we're in there for seaweed breeding, looking at building resilience in, because seaweeds are prone to climate change. And we're already seeing that in the UK along the south coast of England, where you're getting increases in seawater temperatures and you're getting native kelps, native brown seaweeds dying out. So we're looking at, can you start making seaweed more resilient?
Oh wow, this looks like a real laboratory in here. There's test tubes, pipes. What on earth are we looking at here? I don't even know how to describe that.
So we're looking at a lot of different things. In here we've got microalgae that's growing, but we've also got in these flasks, we have a red seaweed, which is Aspharodopsis taxiformis. And it's of note because it's the one that can potentially reduce methane production from cattle if you feed it. There are gaps in our knowledge about how to grow it, when's the best time to harvest it. It puts on a compound called bromoform, and it's that bromoform that interferes with the microbiome in the cattle's gut that then reduces the methane.
And so what stage is the research at on this particular type then? Is it out on your farm at the moment?
No, we wouldn't get permission to grow this out at the farm because it's a non-native. So this actually comes from Naples. It's an invasive species. You do get one of its closest relatives does grow along the UK coastline, and we've been growing that as well.
What would you say is the case for investment going into seaweed farming as opposed to kind of other aquaculture that you might have in Scotland that has kind of similar sustainability potential, like shellfish?
I think it's an untapped resource. There are areas where seaweed can help. I think there's a lot of products that we do use that we don't realise have seaweed in them.
Professor Michelle Stanley from the Scottish Association for Marine Science. Arable farmers have struggled with the weather over the past year as drilling in the autumn was delayed by waterlogged ground and the spring was so dry. So while they're waiting for the crop to ripen in the fields, those who haven't sold in advance are watching prices carefully. Grain isn't just a domestic commodity, but is traded worldwide. And as James Bolesworth, Managing Director at CRM Agri-Commodities, told me, aspects like exchange rates and President Trump's new tariffs make a big difference to the price.
Firstly, we've seen the dollar weaken in the wake of the decision to begin this tariff war, and that means on a relative basis we've seen the pound strengthening, and so that has only facilitated more imports. And last year, for example, we saw milling wheat prices trading around £250 a tonne around this time last year. And because of the strength of the pound, we've seen huge levels of imports of milling wheat by the millers who have taken advantage of this ability to import more cheaply. And we're now looking at milling wheat prices around £190 a tonne. So it's had a big impact there.
And what does that mean on the farm if you've got that volatility? Quite a lot of farmers sell ahead, don't they? So they know what they're going to get. But if you haven't done that, how do you cope with that volatility?
Well, it makes budgeting extremely tricky, because if you're planting wheat and you're looking at prices of £300 a tonne, and then when it comes to harvest, you're seeing prices trading below £200 a tonne, then it causes some significant issues, because you're always planting a crop a year ahead, obviously, of harvesting it. And so from a farm point of view, it raises those sorts of challenges, be it sort of day-to-day operational challenges, but also in terms of investment decisions.
Is it possible then that this year some farmers might be producing at below the cost of production?
I think it's fair to say, yes, there will be farmers out there who are producing around or below cost of production. Now, cost of production is obviously dependent on yields. And of course, you've got yield pressure as well, particularly impacting some of those spring crops, which were planted in extremely dry conditions. And, at the moment, things aren't looking too good, although they've had a reasonable drink of water in the past couple of weeks.
And looking ahead to this year, you've already talked about the difficulties with the weather. But as a farmer looks at their field ripening at the moment, what are they thinking about now for selling that?
So it's a real challenge for farmers at the moment because of the fact that they are limited in what they can sell forward because of the volatility in yields. If you are looking at crops which aren't in terribly good condition, then you don't want to end up selling more than you've got by the time harvest comes around. So they haven't been able to sell as much forward as maybe they would normally do, which means they could be more exposed to the markets now than, typically speaking, they would be in a normal year.
James Bulsworth from CRM Agri Commodities. Now, yesterday we heard how, although the overall cost of rural crime fell last year, livestock theft remains high, according to the insurers NFU Mutual. In Northern Ireland, stealing farm animals has been linked to organised crime. It seems the current high stock values are making them even more attractive to criminals. BBC Northern Ireland's Mid-Ulster reporter Niall McCracken reports.
The theft of animals is a crime that dates back centuries, but in recent years it has followed the wider trend in rural crime, becoming highly organised and often involving a large number of animals being taken in a single raid.
Unfortunately, we're gone and not to be returned.
In January 2024, Dermot Mullen woke up to find that 50 lambs had been stolen from his farm near the village of Park.
Just thought they were in a neighbour man's field, or they just escaped out onto the road. The next thing then we our worst fears was confirmed, and we realised that the sheep had been taken out of the field. Took a while to sink in, so it did. Big financial loss, which is an impact then, and it has a serious impact on your mental health as well.
Dermot isn't alone. Figures obtained by BBC News NI show that there were more than 3,000 animals reported as stolen in Northern Ireland since 2019. The vast majority were farm animals such as sheep and cattle, and most of the reported thefts took place in rural council areas like Mid-Ulster and Causeway Coast and Glens.
I'm John McLenathan, Deputy President of Ulster Farmers Union. There's evidence of organised crime being involved in this, and it's not just a matter of taking livestock. There has to be somewhere for them to go to. It's not opportunistic, it is planned well in advance. And I suppose what we've seen is that the value of that livestock has increased, the value to the criminal and the incentive to the criminal has also increased. So that's why we would urge farmers to take all the steps that they can to protect their livestock.
A spokesperson for the PSNI added that on occasions there can be a link to organised crime and cross-border criminality, and when these type of cases arise, they work closely with police in the Republic of Ireland.
the bigger picture, I suppose, it has to be looked at as well, of where these animals going to and can more be done to stop this. Very important that people comes forward and comes out and talks about it and reports it, because devastating effects on so many people.
That report from Niall McCracken. New technology in farming could mean more jobs, not fewer. That's according to a new report by the Institute for Agriculture and Horticulture, TIAH. It says the expansion of artificial intelligence, apps collecting data and providing real-time advice will mean recruiting and training more people to give farmers technical support. Tess Howe, Head of Partnerships and Policy at TIAH, told me where the new jobs would be created.
We might reduce those numbers of people that are doing the really repetitive jobs where robots can come into play, but actually the engineers, the data analysts, those kind of people that can really push this new innovation forward are going to increase in numbers. And we've seen in the report that potentially up to 120% increase on jobs.
Well, that's amazing. What sort of jobs are we talking about?
So a lot of those would be highly skilled people that are advising farmers, working with farmers and really making sure that that innovation is working daily for the good of the farm.
And how does that translate then to the farm itself, and training these people? How do we get them all there in the right jobs to help farming become more efficient?
I think that's the really big question, because what a lot of these jobs are generic across the economy, not just in farming. So actually we need a really good industry where we can attract these people, and we need to provide quite a lot of contextual training to them as well, so that although they're a data analyst, they can really put that into practice in the field and speak with farmers and understand their needs and where they're going with things. So lots of different training is going to be required for the people on farm. Even just adopting technology requires quite a lot of training to know what your problem is and what's the best solution. The report suggests 95% of the industry will need upskilling at some point in the future.
What happens to farms that don't want to adopt new approaches or can't afford to? Do they get left behind?
I think in some scenarios that could happen. I think, as we see with all technology, the more people that use it, the more commonplace it becomes. It becomes a lot more affordable. So perhaps left behind but not forgotten completely. And I think even when you look at the research and what it's suggesting, some of this will be accessible to anybody and everybody when we're talking about big data and all the analysis and biological pest control, that kind of thing. That is available to everybody. So it's not just about that big shiny machine. There's lots of little things we can do and incrementally increase our business.
And one of the final points made in the report is that there needs to be more encouragement to change, and that effective training in agriculture and horticulture needs a sort of acceptance that there needs to be some upskilling.
Yeah, definitely. And I think I've always said that the skills that we've had in the past are not necessarily the skills that take us forward. Industry's evolving, and that's a credit to the industry that is moving as fast as it is. But we do need a different skill set, so we do need to look at those different opportunities. And I think when you've got new technology coming, you'll see some people that are really keen on that and really willing to learn, others not so much. They'd rather see others get involved. But the main barriers to really investing in agri-tech is the cost. It's not knowing what they need, and it's really how they implement it on farm. So I think the more we can help people with that area, the more we can see change. And that's something we've been working on with the agri-tech centres as well.
A lot of people might worry that actually sometimes we're pushed forwards, but we forget some of the old ways, some of the really useful information that people have learnt over generations that still need to be valued.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in some ways we've gone full circle, haven't we? If we look at the original mixed farming and how we're now focusing on regenerative, I think there's a lot of similarities there. So we can't lose that information and that resource, and that knowledge exchange, those discussion groups are absolutely still going to be absolutely fundamental to this.
Tess Howe from TIAH. That's all from us this morning. I'm Anna Hill. The producer was Heather Simons. Farming Today is a BBC Audio Bristol production.